So we're going back to the moon. But this time, it's not really about planting flags. It's about making a profit. There's a whole new space race heating up, and it's all driven by the promise of some pretty incredible resources. The only problem? Well, the rulebook we're supposed to be using was written way back during the Cold War, for a world that frankly just doesn't exist anymore.
And that brings us to the biggest, most important question for our future in space. A question that is surprisingly tricky to answer. Who actually owns the moon?
Okay, let's get into it. You've got to understand, this is not a repeat of the 1960s. We're talking about countries like the US, China, Russia, Japan, plus a whole bunch of private companies. And they aren't just planning to visit. Nope, they're planning to stay, to build, and to start harvesting the moon's resources. The main drive here isn't just national pride anymore. It's all about getting a long-term economic edge.
So what's actually up there that's worth the, trillions of dollars it's going to take to get it? What are these so-called hidden treasures?
Okay, so the first thing you need to know is that our picture of the moon as just this gray, boring, uniform desert is totally wrong. Just like here on Earth, it's all about location, location, location. There are very specific spots on the moon that have immense strategic and economic value, and those are the places everyone is racing to.
Now, check this out. This map shows us something fascinating about the moon's equator. See those bright white spots? That's where you find the highest concentrations of an isotope called helium-3, which has been deposited by solar winds for billions of years. So what's the big deal? Well, helium-3 is a potential fuel for clean fusion energy, the kind of stuff that could power our entire planet for centuries.
Yeah. And hey, if the equator is the future fuel depot, then the poles are the oasis. They are absolute prime real estate for anyone who wants to set up shop. We found water ice tucked away in craters that are always in shadow. That's a game changer. Not just for, drinking, but you can crack it open into hydrogen and oxygen, stuff to breathe and stuff to make rocket fuel. On top of that, some mountains at the poles are bathed in near constant sunlight, which is perfect for solar power.
Okay, so you've got valuable resources, and you've got a growing list of people who want them. Sounds like a recipe for conflict, right? Well, there's a huge legal problem that throws a wrench in everything. The Outer Space Treaty.
All right, so a little context. The Outer Space Treaty was put together back in 1967, right in the thick of the Cold War. The whole point was to stop the US and the Soviets from sticking nukes in orbit or turning the moon into some kind of military base. But later, in 1979, they tried to make a more detailed moon treaty, and it completely failed. Why? Because the major space powers, including the US, basically said, no, thanks.
And this right here, this is the core of the whole problem. Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty. It's the legal line in the sand, and it says very clearly that no nation can claim territory on the moon. Not by planting a flag, not by using it, not by occupying it. Basically, you can't own it. Period.
So here's the bottom line. If a company can't get property rights, if they can't secure mining claims, how on earth are they supposed to justify spending billions and billions of dollars to build a base on the moon? I mean, who would fund a mine if you can't actually own what you dig up? This legal gray area is a massive roadblock.
And this is where it gets even more complicated. You see that original 1967 treaty? It's all about nations. It's kind of fuzzy on what private companies can or can't do. The failed 1979 Moon Treaty tried to close that loophole. It explicitly said nobody, including companies, could own lunar property, and it demanded that all the resources had to be shared equitably. That's exactly why the big players shot it down. It was seen as a total killer for any kind of commercial space business. So now private companies are stuck in this weird legal limbo.
So, what happens when you have super valuable territory, a ton of eager prospectors, and no clear rules? Well, history gives us a pretty good idea of what that looks like. It could look a lot like a land rush.
Let's hop in a time machine. The date is April 22nd, 1889. We're looking at Guthrie Station in the Oklahoma Territory. It's basically empty plains. But what you can't see is that just on the other side of the border, thousands of people are lined up, just waiting for a single gunshot to signal the start of a wild, frantic race.
That night, boom, a tent city with 10,000 people had literally popped up out of nowhere. A whole city was planned out in just a few hours. It was total chaos, super competitive, and all about rushing to claim the best spots before anyone else could. This is what it turned into, a testament to what happens when valuable land is suddenly up for grabs.
And here's the key. The Oklahoma settlers weren't just grabbing any old piece of dirt.
They were gunning for the land with access to water, the land near future rail lines, the absolutely critical resources. This is a perfect parallel for the moon. Nations and companies are going to be rushing for the lunar poles to lock down that water ice and that constant solar power.
So, the Oklahoma land rush teaches us some really important lessons. First, if you don't have clear rules, you get chaos. Simple as that. There were cheaters, called Sooners, who snuck in early to grab all the best spots. But, and this is a really big but, the fact that there was some authority around, in this case federal marshals, was enough to stop it from turning into a total bloodbath, even if some of those marshals were a bit corrupt themselves. It's a pretty stark warning for what could happen on the moon.
All these lessons from the past bring us right to the urgent questions of our future. Are we going to find a way to cooperate up there? Or are we just doomed to have another conflict on a whole new frontier?
The stakes really couldn't be any higher. We're at a crossroads. We absolutely have to come up with a new system, a new framework that lets us develop the moon without repeating the ugly land grabs of the colonial era and without creating a tragedy of the commons, where a shared resource just gets used up and ruined by everyone.
So, what's a potential solution? Well, one promising idea that's being discussed is something called the Lunar Development Cooperative, or LDC. The whole point is to create an organization that connects everyone's interests, nations, companies, all of us, to make sure the moon is developed peacefully and sustainably.
Okay, so how would this thing work? Well, it's actually pretty smart. Basically, nations and companies would choose to join the cooperative. The LDC would then provide shared infrastructure and services, stuff everybody needs, which makes it cheaper and easier for all the members. Most importantly, it would be the place where global rules and standards get created. And here's the really clever part. You could still try to go it alone if you wanted to, but you'd be at a huge disadvantage, having to pay for everything yourself. It's a system that encourages cooperation by making it the smartest choice, not by forcing it on anyone.
And that brings us right back to our fundamental choice. We have the technology, we're ready to go back to the moon and unlock all its treasures. What we don't have is time. The decisions we make in the next few years are going to determine whether the moon becomes this amazing symbol of human cooperation, our shared inheritance, or if it's just going to become the next battlefield for our oldest, dumbest conflicts. The race is on.